Okay, so I'm Dale Henrichs, and I'm a principal engineer at GemTalk Systems. And today, you know, I think I'm going to be something like a grandpa in this presentation. All right. You know, normally I come up and am showing stuff that I've done and stuff I've done. Today I'm going to talk about stuff that you should do. So, children, when you go out and play with Git, wear your boots and your hat. So, and also, that some of this has to do with Smalltalk itself. So, dangerous liaisons, all right? Smalltalkers, we love to live in the image, but when it comes to dealing with files in the external universe, we hate to do that. We don't want to get involved, and we stay and live in the image all the time. But when you start using Git, you really need to live outside the image. You need to say, all right, I've got disk, I've got shared disk out there, and this is dangerous territory. How much do you live in your image? How much do you live on disk? So we'll see. I'll take you for a walk through that area. All right. So first off, the question is, why Git? All right. What's going on with Git? And I'll talk about that. I'm going to give you an abridged history of Smalltalk source code management, and I will talk a little bit about Filetree, and then I'll talk about, and this is really where Grandpa gets involved, is what do you do beyond Filetree? Because it's more than just storing stuff on disk. And I'm going to talk about a Smalltalk shell. If I have time. We'll drop that one off if I go too far. So why Git? All right. Basically, the combination of Git and GitHub, it provides such a powerful distributed collaboration environment that's just, we don't have that in Smalltalk, all right? And it's the collaboration part that's the real important thing. For open source projects, distributed worldwide, you have to be able to have a way for communicating about the source code that you're working with, and GitHub provides a really good interface. So Git distributed VCS, and it's got a good branching model, but the browser-based workflow for GitHub is basically create a branch, add commits, open a pull request, and this is the important communication piece. Discuss and review your code, deploy and merge. And it's a very simple process, and it's all supported by the browser and makes collaboration very easy. I worked on the Smalltalk CI project with Fabio Niehaus, and I never met him until after we had finished the project. We'd never talked. We sent email occasionally, but a lot of the work was done through GitHub. So it was very useful and powerful. All right. So in 1985, when I started using Tech Smalltalk, I wrote some code where I would save packages to disk and save them in RCS. Oh, this is my 31st anniversary of doing Smalltalk. So I've been doing Smalltalk longer than you guys have been alive. But anyway, I was doing RCS in 1985. In 2016, I'm writing code to save packages to disk and store them in Git. This has got to stop. We need to, there's something going on here. Anyway, and how did we get here? What's been going on? So like I said, in 1985, I was doing RCS and storing packages. In 1991, NV Developer was made available. Now, NV Developer, when I've started talking about Git, people say, well, why didn't you use NV? And I go, it's proprietary. I can't. We can't use it in other Smalltalks. In 1993, I was working at Digitalk, and we had Team V, and I was a member of that team through. That came from OTI, and that was with what became VA Smalltalk. So so they had their proprietary.
Just at one point, Marketplace Smalltalk was using it, so it was actually more than just.
Yes.
When OTI made it, they were selling it for everybody. But then OTI got acquired by IBM, and then Marketplace didn't really want to use it, depend on it, because IBM was their competitor. So
yeah, and when you go through that.
What happened was the NV release, the year later, the visual release. and IBM got all of the Parkplace customer list. So the store had to it was obviously sort of 90s.
When was it done?
Well,
the thing.
It was done before, but it was never released.
Okay, until 2000 or so. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yep.
There was a point where it was going to be called Slash.
Okay.
Smalltalk archive source holder.
Okay. I was going to guess that some of my dates were wrong. Some of the stuff came from the Envy date came from looking at old issues of Smalltalk Report online, PDF versions, and reading through the advertisements, and I found that in the Smalltalk Report 1.1, there was an advertisement for Envy, and that was the earliest reference. Otherwise, websites have gone offline for a lot of this stuff.
Could you summarize it with what they say?
Pardon?
Summarize it, what they say?
I think the thing is let's see. So when we hit in 1993, doing for Digitalk was acquired by Park Place, and part of that, the reason that they were acquired, was to be able to provide an alternative to Envy. And Envy was acquired by IBM, and that made a competition. And as Elliot mentions, there was an internal project going on at Park Place at the time, politics, etc. And so the VisualWorks store, which became available in 2000, was actually being worked on much earlier. So in 2003, Monticello was released, and that was done by Avi Bryant, Julian Fitzel, and Colin Putney. And Monticello was actually based on declarative Smalltalk, and that was some papers that Alan Wurzbach had written in the late 80s. And the idea of declarative Smalltalk is .st file. You execute code to bring that in. You don't have a declaration for a .st file. It just creates methods in the image, and you can't really reason about a .st file without parsing it and bringing it in and doing something different, and that's difficult. So distributed Smalltalk was about creating class definitions, method definitions, and then using those to reason about what was in the image. And Monticello leveraged that stuff. So there's Monticello class definitions and method definitions, and they create snapshots. And one of the classic problems that makes Smalltalk difficult to use in a disk-based environment is when you remove a method from a file, it does not get removed from your image. So it's not good enough to just delete a method on disk and say everybody that loads that will now have that method removed. What Monticello did is they serialized the definitions to disk, and then they would take a snapshot of the image, take the snapshot from disk, compare them. If the method was missing from the disk one and you're loading, it gets removed from your image. So package semantics with class definitions and method definitions have really made Monticello work and become a viable way. Now Monticello itself was stored as MCZ files in binary data. And so whenever a Smalltalk project would start up in a corporation and they said, all right, we store all our source code in SVN, if you're using Monticello files, you're sticking binary data and you're saying that's my source code. So that was a disadvantage there. I guess it was 2005, Git was released, and so Monticello was a DVCS and Git was a DVCS, so we predated there. Then in 2009, I worked on Metacello and started the release process there. And the main rationale for Metacello was multiple things. It was a makefile for Smalltalk, where it would order packages. It would give you conditional loading of packages. So, there's no if-def in Smalltalk, but there's if-defs in just about every other language, and that's how you do multi-platform development. And so Metacello added that as well. There was a third component in Metacello that made it very, very difficult. It was called configuration of, and because Monticello didn't provide versions for multiple packages, you had to have some way to do it. I would make the comparison that RCS versions an individual file. Monticello versions an individual package. CVS allowed you to take multiple RCS files and version them together. Metacello took multiple MCZ files and allowed you to version them together. And then finally, in 2011, Otto Behrens introduced let it be known that he'd invented Filetree. And Filetree basically was writing class definitions on using disk structure to represent object structure. So there was a single method per file, which meant that Git would be able to track history on a method basis. And there's other things in the structure. But about that time,
there was something in between using CBS. I remember using it a while ago, around 2000.
I think, I wrote VCS in 1984, but this was something I did internally because RCS wasn't sufficient. So I have this, I guess, personality or technical, obsession with doing this kind of stuff, and I've been doing it way too long for the same thing. So in 2011, all right, I had been looking at configurations, and if you've ever used a configuration of it, it's very unwieldy, it's very, very difficult, it's very complicated, and I was trying to figure out how to do branching, and I was looking at Git, and I think I made some, snarky comment on a mailing list that said, well, if you get to create a way to use Git in Smalltalk before I get the configuration of, I'll race you. And then Otto Baron said, I've already got something. And so from that moment on, I dropped everything and just headed down this path. So 2011 is when I started, or 2012 is when I started living in using Git and Smalltalk. And so this page, the continuation of the history goes at a much faster pace now. So in 2012, I gave a talk at STIC called Practical Git for Smalltalk, where I introduced Otto's idea. And then at the same conference, at the Camp Smalltalk, there were, I guess, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us that got together and looked at the Filetree format and, came up with a format, disk format, that could probably support multiple Smalltalk versions. 2013, Richard Sargent wrote Cypress Reference Implementation, which is a Monticello-less version of Filetree. 2014, Terry Goubier did Git Filetree. Nicholas Passerini is doing Iceberg right now. And Pharaoh 7 just announced that they'll go to Git-based development for Pharaoh 7.0. And we're putting the Cypress Reference Implementation into Gemstone 3.4. So, that brings us, I want to talk about this. This is a picture of the napkin that we had a dinner at the casino in Biloxi, Mississippi, and we all had dinner and talked about what the format would look like. So you have a language on a page, we have a disk structure on a napkin, and that was 2000. And this is the signatures of the guys that were there. So, and this is the important. Okay, this is grandpa mode. All right. So the main message in Practical Git for Smalltalk, I'll tell you, I was worried about getting pelted with rotten tomatoes and stuff when I started talking at STIC to tell, Visual Works users and Visual Age users that Git is the greatest thing in the world and you really should be using it. But I really didn't want to say and replace your existing ones. Don't replace ND with Git. Don't replace store with Git. But the important thing for me was, as a Smalltalk community, we have no way of sharing source code between multiple dialects. All right? There's some great stuff that's been done and that's available in store for certain things, and it's just, and if you're working in Pharaoh, you go, well, that's very nice to know. So that was the main message of that talk, and why we got 6 or 7 guys that were working in different dialects to agree on a format. So we're a small community. Can we really afford to reinvent the wheel amongst ourselves, let alone try to keep up with the rest of the world? So just to give you, this is just a data point of what does Git-based development kind of look like today, and it's not very complicated. You have an image, you have Filetree repositories. It's a single image, single user model. You use a Metacello workspace for do it for loading projects, and then Toad has built-in support for Git. This is my laboratory that I've used since 2011 to work on this stuff. Git Filetree, you can do commits and pull requests, or you use command line Git today. Using Git Filetree is not, or Filetree is not, the end. It's just the beginning, all right? And there's another big old mountain range that has to be crossed. So the thing is, okay, I've got 30 minutes, all right? And I've been working on this for 5 years, and there's a lot of stuff here. So I'm just going to go kind of skim across the top, but this is Grandpa again, all right? If you do anything, children, think really hard about why you would not use a project Loadspec. Think really hard about why you wouldn't want to use a project tool, and think really hard about why you don't want to do image clusters, all right? So I have a solution, I have a way of doing things in Gemstone with Toad, but, this is my playground, my laboratory for doing it, and it works. But, different people or different folks want to have different workflows, and those workflows need to be supported. So, a project load spec. The main reason for this spec is to specify the load arguments for your Metacello. Don't use a workspace. Don't sit around and ship 6 lines of Smalltalk code that you have to execute to load something. It should be an object, okay? You should be able to download it from a central repository. You should be able to share that object within your environment on a well-known location on disk, and you should be able to download it and then customize it for what you want. And when you make that customized decision, you share that information amongst multiple images. And, and eat your potatoes. So this is I've just thrown this together as a kind of a merge of the stuff that was done for the catalog browser in Pharo, what I did with a thing called Project Entry for Toad, and a couple other, I've looked around at other package managers and looked at stuff. But the key thing here is we've got an object that represents if you notice the highlighted part there and you're familiar with Metacello, that looks an awful lot like a Metacello Smalltalk expression, all right? The big difference is as a program, it's easy for me to go, oh, you're loading the baseline of Tugrik and you're asking to do the default, but the object for that guy in my image wants to load tests. So it's easy when you've got objects to say merge the two, and now you will actually load tests when you operate with this, and you can modify the state of this object. Smalltalk code, okay, get me the Smalltalk compiler. Let me go through the AST and figure out if the value of that variable is the thing that I'm keeping around. The other interesting thing is this other stuff is just useful things. If you're going to have an object that lives up on a website somewhere and is downloaded, the download of that object does not load it in your project, all right, or in your image. So you want to have information about just what it is you're going to bring in, and so that's the other meta information. The next thing is a project tool, all right, and this is the one thing that I guess, because I did Metacello, and you were loading Metacello projects, but it's interesting that in Pharo and Squeak, when you load a Metacello project, it disappears, all right, because you have a Monticello browser that shows you the packages that were in that thing, but there's no tool to say, this is the packages that are loaded, or projects that are loaded, and these are the projects that aren't loaded. Now, how do you talk about projects that aren't loaded? Well, these are those project load specs that you download and bring down to your site and say, I'm interested in those 7 projects. I don't want everything loaded, but I do want them around, and when I use them, I want to be able to load them from my project control panel. And so that's what this is all about. There's more detail showing up here, and I'm not going to go into detail about it because that's another, half hour of, why do you do that? What's that? Okay. But we can talk about, ask me questions. Okay, so that's the thing. Being Grandpa, I can't sit down and basically take you out of my will if you guys don't do what I'm saying. All right. So I'll just ask you to ask questions. All right. I really want to help, and I really don't think that what I did in Toad or what I'm describing here is the answer. But like I said, tell me why you don't think you need a project list. Tell yourself that. And if you want one, then let's talk about what your needs are and where things go. Because I think, like I said, the feeling I have these little, mountain range pictures. I crossed the mountain 5 years ago, and I went into the other side in the valley, all right? And it's a wonderful place, all right? It never rains. It's not humid. And what else happens? Anyway. And I come back, and I survive. Yes?
One question, so I can follow. A project includes what's a configuration map in Envy or something like that?
Well, since I'm not familiar with Envy, but the what you have with a Metacello load specification or configuration is a list of possible things to load, and then when you actually perform the load, it resolves to the packages that are loaded, and then there's a Metacello registration that's kept in the image to record not only what you loaded, what packages you loaded, but also the SHA of the commit that you loaded, which is what you see up here. And this is extremely important, that piece of information there. And so that's what gets loaded in the image and stored in the image. And I think in a tool, it needs to be, there needs to be more around it than just that. And so there's only so far that I could go with Metacello before I get into tool business, and I can't be in the tool business, And did that answer your question?
Yes, and I think the answer is yes.
Basically it fulfills the same spot in the ecology as configuration maps.
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
So let's see. We have and so I got one more thing on the project tool, just to show you the menu. All right, there's a Git menu here. It has branches, checkout, all the standard operations that you would do with Git. But the other interesting thing is all the other things you do with a project. The browse, find, changes, load, log, merge, push, refresh, save. The interesting ones are these two here. Because what's going to happen is when you start sharing repositories on disk, you're going to have two images sharing the same repository. You're going to upgrade, you're going to do a pull request to change the version of the on-disk repository, and you'll load it into the one image. 3 weeks later, you'll come up in the other image and start working. And if you don't track, the SHA and pay attention to it, you'll have a skew where the code that's loaded in your image doesn't match what was on disk. And when you compare to disk, you will see the changes in your image and the changes from disk. So it's very important that you track that and that you keep that information. In Toad, the project list turns red when you have skew, all right? And so version skew is when you're sharing on disk. This is one of the things that you really, really have to be aware of. So I mentioned download from a public site. I think I've covered this. So there's a place out there called Packagist where you download things for, PHP. And the idea is you have like a place where you can go, look at a website, see what things are available. It should be a Smalltalk website, not, each dialect has stuff. But and then you decide, hey, there's a game and it runs on, or here's Tugrik, it runs in Pharaoh and Gemstone, all right? So if I'm in Squeak, I have to say, I got to port that, or Quiz, I have to port that, all right? But now I know where to go. I download the project spec, and this is the URL for, where I get that. And here's the project URL for the GitHub project itself. Let's see, so now we move on to image clusters. What is that? What am I thinking about there? So basically, this is a structure on disk where you have a collection of images that are intended to basically work together and share things, all right? And so I'm sure all of us, when we have multiple images that are laying around on disk. And if you don't have a structure like this, it's very, very hard to keep track of shared things, all right? And, you save out a class into the thing, and then you got to remember to load it in the other image, and then you have to remember if you made changes to save it and load it up in other places. And that's very, very tedious. And so if you have a structure that you can count on from Smalltalk, and the way I think of this is you're extending the notion of the image to the disk, okay? This is not a foreign thing, Let's not make it foreign. Let's make it part of the image. Let's make it part of the thought process and make it accessible. What do the levels of sharing are, the thing I think about is a site, okay? And this is on your personal machine. This is not, but the site is, every time I load Metacello, I want to load this version. Okay, that goes on the site. Then you're sitting down and you have a Seaside project or something where you have a collection of projects that are all going to be the same version for everything that you're doing with Seaside, including Seaside will always be this version because for this project, everything's going to run against that. And there's a whole collection of different projects that are going to be that way. So that's your cluster. And so everybody in that cluster, you have multiple images, maybe different versions of Pharaoh, or open for different reasons, are going to share a lot of this, the same version. So this is literally sharing the clone. Okay, so you're sharing the same version, which is why you need skew and the other things. And then the image is every time you do something, you're going to say, I want this to be a clone that's personal to this image, all right? Because I'm going to break whatever it is that's going on, and I only want to break myself, and I don't want to lose, the shared state in the cluster area. So what do we share, all right? And what, I've got repositories, and that's what I've been talking about. Workspaces should be shared, all right? Scripts, if I have time, I will talk about what a Smalltalk scripts would be shared, and then projects would be shared. And the projects are where the project load specs are stored. And then you have it at site, cluster, and image level. All right, how do you share Git repositories? All right, and I don't know, so I've got a cluster of images over here, and this is my image for that image repositories that are only for that image. Here are the cluster repositories that I load from all the images in that cluster. And then the images in the cluster would go over to the site and share there. And then each cluster has a similar thing going on. All right. So this is how I imagine the Git repository sharing. You have a direct reference from an image to a particular place. In theory, an image could reference the private over here because you have to be able to do that, but you have to have some structure and know when you're violating it, and then you violate it for a good reason. So anyway, so this is the picture. Is this the greatest thing? I don't know, but I know that with experience, the first couple, I would say 6 to 9 months of using Toad in this environment, I just started going crazy in terms of what am I using, which repository goes where, have I uploaded, have I updated. So you're gonna, I tell you, if you don't wear your raincoat, you're going to catch a cold and you'll get sick. So now files and objects is a different thing. And the notion here is like if you have a set of workspaces, all right, and you have a workspace 1 and 2 up in the site directory. And in the cluster directory, you have a workspace 2 and 3. And in your image, you have a 3, all right? So if you basically compose these guys, all right, you don't want to see the workspace 2 from the site if you've got a workspace 2. You want to override. So this is kind of a subclassing scheme for workspaces, and it's and you can compose the workspaces that are visible from within the image as 1, 2, and 3. And magically, be picking them up from the right places, all right? Now, one of the reasons that you want to share workspaces is that in an image, and you make a change to the workspace, and you've got 3 other guys in the cluster, how do those 3 other images pick up the new workspace? You save it to disk in a known location, and everybody looks there. And these are the known locations. And I look there, and if W3 changed, I pick it up. I have the overrides because I may not want to pick up the changes from W3 at the cluster level. So this kind of, this model in Toad, I actually have an object on disk that executes the merge or the composition algorithm so that you can put your own object on there and do whatever you want. So this is one of the things that I did in Toad is I really am not doing directory structure that is, and everybody's looking at dead stuff on disk. Drop objects on disk. STON is a good format for sharing objects, and you just write it to disk. When it's written to disk, it's available to everybody. Don't have internal caches. Read it from disk every single time. But sometimes Grandpa says crazy things, right? If you think that's crazy, all right, fine. Do I have time? Okay. I just wanted to buzz through this because, this is another cranky thing, all right? Now, Smalltalk started as an operating system, all right? There was nothing outside the image, okay? So, naturally, that's why we think everything's inside the image today and think that way. But one of the things that was, I guess an artifact that was being developed in the interactive operating systems of the day were command line interfaces. You know, is there one in Smalltalk? No. You know, would it be convenient? I think so, all right? So this one is, I've just read about vitamin C, and I think you should be taking vitamin C every day, all right? And it's going to be good for you. Anyway, a couple things with a command line interface, all right? On Linux, how many possible commands are there when you sit down at the shell? Okay? In your image, how many possible commands can you reach from the menu system? How big is your system menu going to get before you match how many commands are actually available on Linux? Okay? How many panes in a browser do you need to put all the menus? How many browsers do you need to put all the menus that you would go? How hard do you have to work to navigate through the system menu to the thing? Now I can do what I want to do. When you know all along that all you want to do is do a, project load toad. Okay? So, command lines are very valuable. The other thing is man pages. Okay? In Smalltalk, when you want to know what something does, you hope to find something in the class comment. You hope to find an example method, and you hope to find documentation. And the command line commands have a help command, a help option. All right? And you can create man pages. All right? And so let's see. I think so. The thing that I want to talk about here, because I'm not going to rush through, is you put a command line. It's very simple. I've got an implementation of a command line that does POSIX command line parsing. Okay, so that part's taken care of. You can have a little console window in Smalltalk. That's not too hard to do. That can be done. All right, and then you implement everything in Smalltalk. This is Smalltalk. This is not Linux. So this is an example of a man page for the browse class method that I have in Toad. And here is the highlight of that thing, where you have the synopsis, different options, and then I've got a bunch of examples, all right? And so, you can browse a class method or stream that does a regex comparison on those guys. If you use -exact, it doesn't. If you use hierarchy, you get a list of classes. Now, Toad lists a bunch of classes and without browsers. But if you use hierarchy, you get the hierarchy, the class hierarchy for that. If you use full, you actually get a class browser. So, this is very straightforward. These are things that you can memorize and use a lot, all right? And you can build other scripts out of these things. So,
I don't understand. It seems to me that the sophisticated Git or Mercurial user uses GUI tools. They don't work on the command line. So why are you not focusing on building GUI tools in the image that hide the command line? Why are you furthering the thing?
Why am I? No, the thing is, and yet there is the command line for Git. If your GUI tool doesn't do a good job of doing whatever, making it easy for you to do your GUI tool, which we already do in Smalltalk. Am I talking about all the GUI tools that you need to build? Because there's more, all right? But I assume it's very straightforward to build that. The reason I'm talking about a Smalltalk shell is not for Git, okay? I think it exists in a lot of different places. It's very useful, all right? And it is a power user, all right? But it also leads to some interesting, the other thing that this does, when you sit down and say, I'm going to have a command line interface, and I'm going to have a browser-based interface, it forces the developer to actually partition his or her code. How many places does all the business logic end up in a menu click in a browser? How many that shows up all over in systems. And if I want to run that exact same functionality, I have to copy and paste because there's no API. If you're doing this, following this scheme, what it did is it forces you to think in terms of, higher level APIs that other people can build GUIs on top of. So anyway, like I said, I'm a cranky grandpa, all right, and I'm sitting down and telling you that you should do this, and you're a grown boy, and if you don't want to use it, don't. And so I think this is my last slide. So basically, so I think the basic message is Git is more than just implementing the Git commands. Having a successful environment is not having just the Git commands available from with your image, all right? There's more stuff that you need to have around it, or you should have around it. You should eat your peas, all right? And I have broken trail with Toad. I've gone across the mountain. I've done the work there. I've lived there for a very long time. I've come back and I've survived, and I have a functioning system, all right? Do I think you should copy it? No, don't copy it, you know? But ask questions, okay? Because I'm more than willing to help, okay? And, you know, that's the part that, you know, if nothing else comes, you know, just talk things over. I will not tell you that you should. I won't be that grandpa that says you have to do it this way, okay? Because I understand everybody needs to do their own thing. There are different workflows. You know, the systems are different. They have different requirements, and you know, and I know that my implementations are not all exactly right. All right, take them, do them better. But like I said, think about it. So anyway, so I'm done. Did you say a one question? You said one question? One question? Yeah. Time for one question.
Okay. You said that the problem with multi-channel packages and DCS is that the file is binary. Okay? And the solution is Filetree.
Ah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So Filetree is not only text-based. Is a lot more, very different from a package file.
Yeah.
So my question is, if the problem was that the multi-channel package file is binary, why not just make it text?
So the thing was, this was a multi-platform solution, okay? And there is no text file that all Smalltalk dialects will actually read. And we were there for Camp Smalltalk on the weekend, okay? We would not have accomplished anything at all trying to come up with a common text format for every dialect that we could imagine, okay? So it was a compromise, okay? And the compromise was add some features to Otto's original structure that would make it possible for different dialects to basically share source code.
And looking in retrospective, do you think that Filetree makes it harder to use GitHub web tools than a single file per package would have?
So the thing about the granularity, okay? So the granularity of Filetree was chosen to be at the method level because we didn't have to worry about the syntax for differentiating between where's the end of method, the end of method, okay? And so the thing is I believe that it's always been part of the Filetree philosophy of having multiple formats. In fact, Filetree right now, I think there's 6 different formats that are being supported because it went through 6 iterations really fast. All right, and then Martin's working on a file per class implementation.
I'm working on what I call a Cypress 2.0 specification. And for the file per method format, there's just a couple of little tweaks, but then there's a file per class format as well, which has some advantages and some disadvantages. It depends on what you're going to be doing with it. And being careful to make the information represented identical between the formats so that you can convert between the formats easily and not losing information. So when I get done with that, which hopefully is going to be in the next 2 months, when I'm happy with it, I'm going to be spreading it to the community for comment and review, and hopefully we can get something that a lot of people agree on.
So I get in a really interesting place, which is that we have a multi-title package which has branched from the interpreter for calling, and there's a defunct branch. So multi-title branches quite well.
Pardon? They're what?
We export that.
I didn't hear. Wait, I didn't hear when you said they are quite posh.
Oh, I live in an interesting place.
Uh-huh.
We have a package, vmmaker.os code, that branched from vmmaker, the interpreter, vmmaker. We haven't been able to get those branches together yet. We don't have the effort.
Yeah.
So Monticello branches. But what happens with vmmaker is that you push out sources to C, and you used to push out sources to C when you built a VM, which is really difficult. So then you had like one tree of source, which is the platform support, and then the C that you would punch out at any time from vmmaker, which meant that if you wanted to build a VM, you had to start up a smalltalk and punch out things, and then if you wanted to debug your C VM, you have to reconstruct those sources. So it's really important to version control the sources that go out. If you want to debug it, then you simplify the build because you can now build this thing. So our C part lives in GitHub, and we work with Git, but our source code lives in Monticello. It's actually rather nice because the Monticello stuff does smalltalk really well. And GitHub does communication really well. But as far as managing C, I don't think Git gives me anything that lots of other version control gives me, other than the headache of learning a really perverse set of verbs for doing version control, because a really perverse guy doesn't want to use the same words that everybody else does. Okay? So I don't buy this Git plus GitHub. I absolutely buy GitHub. But telling me that Git is any good isn't going to work. I do not believe you.
In 2012, my one hope was that someday small talkers would debate whether Git or SVN or Mercurial or Fossil was a better DBSC. And, because the only reason for saying Git and GitHub is you have to pick something, and GitHub is very good for collaboration in Smalltalk code.
It doesn't matter. If you look at the Monticello menu, there are a list of repository types. Gilad and I implemented an outlook to what was it? Subversion?
So, Elliot. So the thing is my talk at let's see, I would say that I could give you an hour talk of why, what's wrong with Monticello from my perspective.
But you can fix Monticello. Don't talk for Monticello. Monticello is not a given.
What I'm trying to say is this debate can go on for a very long time because there's a lot of things in there, all right? And so I'll spend the afternoon arguing with you if you'd like, all right? Because it hones, it's very interesting to do. But yeah. Thank you.
So the next time you should be here at 2:30. Okay, so 1 hour and